Today I want to talk to you about what we achieve in our lives, what we fail to achieve, and so forth. And I sent you a quote from Oscar Wilde. I had previously thought it was attributed to Goethe, but apparently I was wrong. It's Oscar Wilde. And what he said is that there are two tragedies in life, one that we don't get what we want, and the other that we do get what we want. And I think if we examine our lives, we'll find this to be true, because success does not always bring the total reward that we had expected. And failure, of course, is something that we can beat ourselves up about, why we did not achieve what we set out to achieve. But our efforts are actually much more fragile than we would like to believe. And we can work very, very hard for things, as we generally do. We can work for material comfort. We can work for family and love. We can work for esteem in our profession or our career. We can work for happiness. We can work for adventure, for exploration, for trying to understand the world and its mysteries. There are many pathways that we can take and do take. And we pursue them usually with great enthusiasm, especially when we're young. And it takes a lot of effort to carve out the kind of life that we want, the kind of stability, the kind of structure, and so on. And as Jung so beautifully described in one of his essays, I think it was on marriage, he said at a certain point at midlife, around 40, everything starts to shift. It's as if the sun reaches the midpoint and starts to go down over the horizon. And everything that we built kind of overtakes us. If we've built a business, then, and let's assume that it's successful, it now, rather than the enthusiasm that we brought to it in the first place, now we feel the burden of it, the responsibility of it. It needs lots and lots of taking care of, like buying a house and then, needing all the repairs and so on after a time. So it burdens us. What once fueled us begins to burden us. If we have children, they grow and they overtake us. They get taller. They have their own ideas. They go into the world to establish their own place, just like we did. But it may not be to our liking necessarily. And of course, then there are the disappointments, the things that we did not achieve, that we failed to get, or things that slipped out of our hands through inattention or through tragedy. Things are taken away. There is loss. The older you get, the more you lose things. Parents, relatives, friends, lovers, children, so on. Dreams. The world changes and you don't fit into it anymore. Like I guess is what's happening now with AI. It remains to be seen, but you can train for a profession for a long time and then find that lots of the aspects of that profession can be taken over by machine. And so you have to reestablish and rearrange and whatever, because life is fluid and it's constantly changing. And we're much more, while we're strong and able, we're also much more fragile than we believe. It's like slipping on a banana peel, how quickly things can change. So what can you rely on? How do you negotiate this? How do you accept it? How do you deal with it? And this is an enterprise, if you will, because you have to put your attention on what endures and what is eternal and less on what constantly is changing. So it's not to say that you abandon the outward world, making a living, paying your bills, holding, keeping up with friendships, holding your responsibilities to your parents or to other people and so on. That you can still pursue that. In fact, you should pursue it. But at the same time, you have to get to your core, to your center, so you're not so much beaten up by circumstance. If you have the esteem of others and then you lose the esteem of others, that's pretty hard to take. If you have money and then you lose money, that's pretty hard to take. So you have to have something that's more stable than that. And despite our efforts, when we get to a certain point, we can look back and say, oh God, I made this mistake and I made that mistake. Why didn't I pursue that? Why did I choose this path? Why didn't I pay more attention to the other? And then at that point, you can't go back. So there's a kind of inner peace that can be achieved if you're more realistic. I'm not talking about realism in terms of like, oh, you have to make a living so you can't be an artist. I'm not talking about that kind of thing. But about the nature of life itself, which is not really created for you. I mean, when you come into the world, you might think it is created for you as master of your own universe, as star in your own movie. I mean, that's what 5-year-olds think. And we carry that on into adulthood. Why is the world the way it is? Why are these wicked people? Why do people steal? Why do people go to war? Why do people abuse other people? These are all strange, really. When you think about it, you read stories in the newspaper about what people do for money or for passion, and it's strange. It's ridiculous because you can get much more without murdering and abusing and stealing and so forth. But you can say the same about nature. Why does a hurricane come and destroy the home that you built so carefully and with so much love? Why does a tornado come from nowhere and rip your house out? Why is there like the weather now? Why is the weather so hard? I mean, why is it 120 degrees in Phoenix or Houston? I mean, in Pakistan, apparently, Lahore. I mean, why? People are just trying to go about their lives. They don't need this extra pressure. I've lived long enough that I've had my successes and my disappointments and my losses, my severe losses. And I think that the conclusion that I've come to is that the only thing you really have is love, the ability to love, to be kind and to be compassionate to other people and to yourself. Because despite all the judgment that's poured on us by all the critical people that pass through our lives, really, we just have to be kinder, a lot kinder. The society itself is extremely harsh. It's extremely harsh. So the way that you get at some kind of peace about the nature of the world, right? Why were your parents so mean to you? Why did a parent die when you were so young and couldn't take care of yourselves? Why? I found during my life there were times when I actually turned to God and I said, why? And I wasn't necessarily talking about me, but just about the sorrow and the difficulties that people endure on this planet, which seems so unnecessary to a human eye anyway. So how do you go about getting accustomed to the ways of the world so that you increase your happiness? And the ancients knew quite a lot about it. I mean, the Taoists, but also the Stoics, the Greeks, who basically had a philosophy which said, don't get excited and don't get despairing. When good things happen, don't say, oh, look how fantastic I am. Look what I created. Oh. And when things go against you, don't say, oh, what a failure I am. What an idiot I am. How crappy am I and all this. Try to take the lessons that come to you through your experience, which means turning from being victimized, from feeling that you're being oppressed by circumstances or by other people, but turning that around and actually saying, what can I learn from this? I'm not saying that bad things are good for you necessarily. I don't particularly enjoy suffering, and I hope, and I don't like other people to suffer. But if you are suffering, you can ask the question, what can I learn from this? Maybe it's learning that you have to be more patient. Maybe it's learning that you can't have everything you want. Maybe it's learning that there are other people in the world and they don't necessarily care about you. Maybe it's learning that nature doesn't care about you. I don't know what the learning is, but you have to choose what is happening to you and turn it around so it becomes a positive force in your life. And then it's the observation practice, the same observation practice you use for yourself and how you behave and how you respond to situations. You can also look at the world in that way. I mean, you can read a story in the paper about somebody who kills for money and or does some other terrible deed, and feel sad about it, but know that there are people who are propelled to do things because they want money, or they're propelled to do these things because they're seeking love and they're jealous and they can't stand that anybody else should have their loved one. Whatever, there are millions of stories, and each of us has our own story. Some of us started from comfort and some from great challenges. Some of us are financially secure and others are not. Some of us are emotionally secure and others are not. Not everybody gets, I think that there isn't anybody who gets everything. So you have to become accustomed to the reality. And one reality, of course, is that you die. And that all your labors, your name and all your efforts and all your relatives and all the people that knew you, they're also going to die. And you're not going to necessarily be remembered. There are people who are remembered, a handful of people who have made huge contributions, whether, going back, through religion or historically, there are people who have made huge contributions and whose names live on. But for most of us, this is not the case. We're here for a very short while. We're very fragile creatures. Life throws us curveballs when we least expect it. We can fall into despair. Sometimes it's hard to keep going. Sometimes it's hard to have the courage to keep going. But if you could observe what's around you with kindness, and you don't always have to say why are people this way, why are things this way. This is the way they are. And then you can negotiate your path through that. And in addition to that, of course, the sounds, because the sounds are vibratory, and the sounds recall you to your vibratory core. You are connected to the universe through vibration. The universe was created with vibration, with sound. And when we make these non-verbal sounds with our own voice, we are drawing upon our own spiritual power to connect us to something greater than ourselves, and we can rest in that. Nothing can change. There are certain things that we cannot change despite our efforts, despite all our efforts. When my daughter was ill, I found myself remembering Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All of the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. There are things beyond our control, and those things have to be accepted because you can't change them. And if you can do it, if you can look at yourself with love, at the people that you surround you with love, even the people who have injured you, to look at them with love, because they're also caught in their own story, right? And you don't have to be perfect. You can be angry. You can avoid people who are abusive. I'm not advising to, to put yourself in difficult circumstance, but I'm saying to cultivate that kindness. And that kindness brings a certain humility. And that humility reminds you that you're part of a whole stream of events, that you're making your contribution, whatever it is, to the whole human endeavor. And that's it. And you can do it with gentleness and kindness. And out of that humility comes joy, because the ego does not bring joy. The ego just is, I want, I need, look at me. No, this is something different. This is something different. So I'm going to stop talking now and and begin sounding. Just give me a minute. My voice is a little scratchy again. I think it's just allergies. Okay. Now, if you could put your hand on your heart and with your intention, send the sound of ah through your heart so you can feel the vibration underneath your hands. That's how you'll know that you're pitching the sound correctly. And repeat it 3 times, doing it slowly at your own pace. Don't force your breath. Just last as long as you last. Do 3 sounds and then rest. Chad is reminding me of the Gurdjieff quote. We are not spiritual creatures trying to be human. We are, I'm sorry, I'm messing it up. We are not physical creatures trying to be spiritual. We are spiritual creatures trying to figure out how to live in our physical body, how to exhibit our spiritual nature through our physical body. We are naturally spiritual. We are formed out of spirit. That's who we are. We're in this body, and it's very dense, and so we can get forgetful and get confused about our nature and the nature of our time here. So thank you, Chad, for that reminder. Okay. So if you think of your life as a development of consciousness and of coming into your true spiritual nature, which is a natural progression if you don't stop it. That's what happens as you get older. You get clearer and clearer and your consciousness deepens. Then we find that we can face what we have to, whether it's in our later years, our declining physical strength, our declining impact on the world, you know, and to face death calmly. We have a role to play. We just may not know what it is, but we do each have a role to play, and we're part of an organic system. So even though we may feel lonely sometimes and alone, we are actually part of something very integrated with other creatures that are a reflection of the divine, but also the divine itself. Okay, this is from Susanna, who says, I find we have increasing impact on the world even as our bodies decline. I find that to be true also. There's a lot of flailing around when you're young and you think you're actually accomplishing a good deal. But as your energy decreases or your physical capacity increases, you can also have the choice of focusing, of getting much more focused and clearer and have simpler ideas about how to have an impact and work for that. Susanna says, touche. I was watching these deer on the lawn, young deer. They had just been born, maybe a couple of days old. And they were so full of joy. They were prancing around, and they were just so full of joy. And the expression in their physical body, maybe after being confined in the womb, that kind of release of being able to really move, you know. And I thought, that's how we come out. What happens to us, you know? And what happens to the deer? They also have to survive. They have to survive hunters and predators and all kinds of things, you know? But if we pay attention to what is enduring, we can, first of all, it brings much more joy and comfort and happiness. I mean, you know, just from a completely self-serving standpoint. But you really, you just get a softer view of the world, even with all these maniacs parading around, which we have a good view of in election season. We have a good view of a lot of crazy people seeking power, you know. So people can be driven crazy by power, huh? If you seek power, if you seek great career success, if you seek great monetary rewards, you might achieve it. But in the process, you're going to have to give up a lot. You're not going to have time to pay attention to your family, for example. So when all's said and done and you've created your business or whatever, you might turn around and notice that nobody cares about you. You know, that your kids are all gone, or you've lost your spouse or whatever. And the reverse is also true. You could devote yourself to family and give up, professional prospects and feel sad about that. You just can't have all of it. So just remember to be kind. And if you're really beating yourself up over a supposed failure, I think it's worth looking at that so-called failure and really trying to understand what it is you're talking about. Did you really want it? Did you really, really want it? Was that your soul's cry? Or were you doing somebody else's dream? Did you screw up? Did you screw up, or was it circumstances outside of yourself that caused the so-called failure? Or maybe you consider yourself a failure because you're not doing as well as your neighbor. You don't have as much square footage or something like that. It just, you have to look at what it is that you think the failure is. And imagine and conceive of your life as something longer than what you're thinking about right now. It really shifts and changes, and what we invest our energies in changes as we get older. And you don't always want the same things, or you don't want to go after the same dreams you did when you were young. You have to hold things gently, because we can't hold them very tightly. If we hold them too tightly, we crush them. And if we hold them too loosely, they fly away. So it's a delicate balance. And again, because Jung said this so beautifully, and who can come to the end and say they've drunk of the whole cup of life with grace? I don't think any of us, because things happen that are very difficult to accept. Any other comments or? Okay, so I'm going to finish with some sound. I know my voice is not good today, but I can't do anything about the endless new allergies that are coming our way. Okay. So thank you for coming, and always a pleasure, and have a good week. Stay well and enjoy the end of summer. And as usual, I get these lovely hearts. I thank you so much for your lovely hearts. And that's from Shayana, saying it was lovely. And from Susanna, oh, thank you. Okay. I'm just looking at I want to end on this. I'm just looking at Susan's note Susanna's note. I find we have increasing impact on the world, even as our bodies decline. Some stuff, there are things that we can do are so simple, kindnesses, softness, listening to someone without judgment. These are simple things that we can do, and that have a big impact on the person who's suffering, who in turn has impacts on other people and their family and so forth. So never think that you don't matter, because you do. Everybody matters. You take care and have a wonderful week. Okay. Bye-bye.